Hello, I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome. Since 2016, I've been answering your questions, giving advice and inspiration to countless gamers. Here, you can ask questions in the comments and get your own videos as an answer. So I encourage you, enjoy by all means. But come back to visit with your friend, the Dungeon Tutor. Hello, I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome. Since 2016, I've been answering your questions, giving advice and inspiration to countless gamers. Here, you can ask questions in the comments and get your own videos as an answer. So I encourage you, enjoy by all means. But come back to visit with your friend, the Dungeon Tutor. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome! Today we are going to cover another topic from RPGaDay. Today is the 27th, and that means the 27th topic, which is tactics. Now, of course, we can go and talk tactics all day long, encirclement techniques, and it just goes on and on. Frequently, those of us who use more imaginative environments rather than having battle mats and miniatures and 3D terrain, things like that, combat tends to be more abstract. You can encourage your players to think tactically, like supporting each other, keeping an eye for cover, by letting them say, hey, I'm going to go and find some cover. Unless your encounter specifically has a lack of it, that's not unreasonable. But I thought instead I would talk about the tactics that gamers frequently use. And to help with that, I have a particular text, which I believe I got from Etsy. And I do not have a credit on it for the person who came up with this, so yeah, we'll see. But I have these 20 rules, tactics, to be successful at D&D. And I think by proxy, a lot of other role-playing games. So, we're going to get into this and discuss these. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I bought this a while ago, so I can't honestly remember exactly my feelings on it. So, let's start with a big one. The one that gets quoted back to me probably more often than any other of these strategies. Number one, never split the party. Now, this is a particular view of thinking which comes from long periods of time where the game master was always trying to split the party. After all, you get rid of some of that sense of safety if not everybody is around you. If you aren't packed cheek to jowl by your, for example, if you are a wizard, it's easy to feel insecure if you don't have your warriors around you protecting your frail wizardly body. And even a warrior off on his own doesn't all of a sudden have the expertise of those who can deal with situations that can't necessarily be solved by sword. So, not splitting the party is just a good strategy in many circumstances. But I would hazard to say, not all. There are certainly games where your character is more than safe enough to travel by themselves. Inside of a city, for instance, your average city has law and officers of the law and a presence. People expect the law to be followed. So if you go out all the time with your entire group packed around you, everybody dressed to kill, not in a style way, I mean armor and weaponry dangling off of them, you're going to get some looks. You're going to get possibly pointed out by that same security that everyone else enjoys because you suddenly are the apparent danger to everybody. And that is by design. That's what civility is. It means not having to travel with protection all the time. So, it's important for players to also kind of know when to choke that back a little bit. And there are some games, too, where the expectation is the players are themselves highly competent people. Take the game Invisible Sun, for instance. One of my favorite examples, this little beauty right here. The black cube of Invisible Sun. It's a glory. But the idea is that all of your characters are Vizsla. They're all wizards of their own stripe, and all of them have resources that can keep them relatively safe and functioning inside of the society of the Vizsla. especially in the city of Saturnine. Does that mean that there's no dangers? Not at all. It could be a very, very dangerous city, but it does mean that your characters don't need to feel like everybody has to be around them at all times. They are competent. They are hopefully resourceful enough to survive in that city. Now, yes, can you make a character that absolutely probably should never be by themselves? Probably. But not easily. Almost every single one of the classes in one way, shape, or form can defend themselves to the expectations of realism. And that's realism with a massive air quotes, because there's almost nothing that's real about Invisible Sun. It's such a surreal setting. But you don't need to feel like everything has to be done with everybody else around. As a matter of fact, the largest part of that game can be focused around what happens when everybody else is not around, where you only come together in the game to solve the things that you as a group are working on, one thread that everybody's tangled up in perhaps, or one focus that everybody shares. Other than that, your characters are picking out arcs and accomplishing storylines within themselves. And that's how you advance your character more so than the group objectives sometimes. Just a thought. But that does say that there are certainly times when you don't want to have the rest of your group around, especially if you're a character that gets into the skullduggery and shady dealings. So that there's a time and a place for never split the party. Most usually in dungeon settings or areas where you're in danger. All right. Number 2. DM is God, and DM is always right. Now, I'm not going to say that's true at all, because I am frequently not right. It goes that way. We're human too. We are players, although we are also game masters. And yes, we can screw up. But we are God? Oh no, that's totally right. If you have a God complex, being a game master is totally a way to scratch that itch, because quite literally, anything you want to have happen can happen. But just like a real deity, if you lose the trust, if you lose the belief that your players have in you and your world, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't matter anymore, really. So it is a balancing act that you have to take. You have to have your world make sense. You have to have your world have consequences and behave in a way that everybody else can get behind. And then after that, it's gravy. Want to drop a troll on the party to, get them all ramped up and excited? Sure, but there you go, have a troll. Rawr, party beats down troll, party gets some experience, they're kind of happy about that. You got your troll in, you're happy about that, everybody wins. So, is it possible? Yes. Can you be a vengeful and dark god? Sure, but you're not going to have players for very long, typically. So there is that. Think about it. And the GM is always right. We're not always right. However, there is a time and a place to pursue that we're not always right, and rarely is that the middle of the game. If the game master says, okay, I've heard what you have to say, you don't agree with my ruling, we'll table it and talk about it later, is not the time to keep pursuing it. I will say that. If the game master doesn't have a certain level of control over the game, then there's no point in having the title. So, everything within reason. And plenty of communication, always communication. All right. Do not argue with the DM. Yeah, that is the thing. You're not going to make a DM change their mind most of the time by arguing. Reason tones, fact, conversation, that's the way to do it. And a game master can always take back something they've said. Nothing is ever that dire. Even if your character dies and you can come forward and say, Game Master, my character shouldn't have died. And you can express that, they may be able to be convinced. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. All right, 3, always check for the traps. I mean, yeah, that's how you don't get caught by traps as often. But it is possible to go too far into that, checking everything for traps. I've seen games watered down to the point where they were utterly at a standstill because of the incessant need to check for traps. Seriously, especially in low levels when the percentages to finding things aren't all that good. I mean, doing it is a good idea on things that are obviously traps. Doing it is a good thing for things that are probably traps. Doing it may be a good thing for things that are maybe traps. But also sometimes there are times to just say, we need to keep going. especially if there's a time limit put upon you. So always check for the traps. Yeah, but the best traps are the ones that aren't put in places you're not going to look for them. So 4, if the DM asks, "Are you sure?" don't do the thing. Well, that's kind of dumb on its face, because a good game master might say that all the time. Are you sure you're going to say that to the Lizard Chief? And if your convictions are strong and you believe you're doing the right thing, then do it. If it's what your character would do, do it. Not doing something because the game master says, you can certainly try, or are you sure you want to do that? That's actually metagaming. Your character doesn't have a game master in there saying that. And while we often do try to help you by, warning away from things that are truly foolish, measure that out with the fact that sometimes the game master will possibly just ask that. I frequently throw down the "you can certainly try," even to things that they can certainly try and will probably succeed at. I do this all the time. So that has some use for some game masters, not every one of us. 5, rest. You don't know what's out there. Yes. Clearly you don't want to go out with your resources taxed any more often than you have to. But here's the thing. Sometimes you have to. I have party members who bemoan the fact that they can't get a full rest, get back up to full, have an encounter, and can't fully rest again. I hear that. It's like, it's not my fault you blew all of your resources fighting one opponent, knowing there was probably going to be more. That's on you. And it isn't necessarily fair to expect the game to be hijacked, making everybody wait 16 hours so that you can have another long rest before you make any progress. It's losing an entire day. That's ludicrous in many circumstances. So better would be rest and then proceed as if you're not going to rest again anytime soon. Budget your resources. Don't be overly extravagant when you don't need to. That's, to me, a more useful strategy. 6, never plot out loud. God is listening and taking notes. Darn straight we are. And sometimes your ideas are more devious than what we come up with. That's patently and absolutely true. We do listen to you. We totally do. I mean, sure, there are some game masters who are completely tied down to their story. Maybe they're following a module or something like that, but my goodness, listening to the players plotting, and sometimes they would make fine game masters themselves. Sometimes their ideas are superior to my own. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I don't always have the perfect storylines, and their paranoia-infused plotting in reverse. I can't tell you the number of times they made all these plans, and I just look at them and I go, "You son of a gun! How did you figure that out?" Not knowing that I absolutely had something else in mind, but I'm going to totally ride on that because that is much more awesome than what I thought of. This does happen. I'm not going to cite examples to incriminate myself, but yeah, I've had a couple of players just absolutely on their own, very gifted game masters, but they'll come up with this plot, and if it doesn't exactly dovetail to what I'm coming up with, I might jump to what they came up with, because honestly, it might be a better idea. So, yes. 7. The skeleton always animates. Again, this is actually a parable, in a manner of speaking, because the skeleton always animates. If you see a skeleton, assume that it's going to come up and attack. Many players really go into that by smashing the skeleton. And I can't say that they're wrong. If there's a possibility for skeletons to animate and you see an intact skeleton, yeah, you might as well just make sure to crush the skull, snap the spine, something so it can't come up and attack you. I get it. But there is also a deeper meaning behind that we can trace. For example, if you've ever played the game Shadowrun, there are certain expectations and tropes in Shadowrun about different points of betrayal that you can expect. Shadowrun is a nasty world. There's a lot of high-powered, devious people who want to employ you, but don't necessarily want to pay you, see you get the payoff, trust you. So the thought is, don't trust anybody because they're always going to get screwed. But I find that it's more effective as a game master to let players have straight up runs where there's no treachery, no duplicity. Why would anybody trust any mission if it's always going to lead to a betrayal? They shouldn't. So frequently, you've got to have a couple of missions where, okay, we did the run, we meet the Johnson, we get paid, we go home. No attack aircraft, no spiteful retribution, no, we got away clean. You did a good job. Well done. You need that. You need those things to take down the sense of imminent disaster, the imminent plots that we're supposed to always run. If you don't always run those, you get them back in your playlist. The players then may not necessarily expect the worst, and they may actually take some steps that otherwise they wouldn't if they were more well guarded. It's an important thing to think about in all scales. Sometimes those tropes, if you just let them fail as a trope and play things straight, you might get that trope back in your pocket to use at some point. So, 8, if something is too good to be true, it probably is. Oh yes, the old pessimistic. And yes, it's true. If you are promised the world, expect not to get that, especially if it's way beyond your power level. In which case, you're not really out anything because you shouldn't have had that to begin with. So, you know, that does a lot of carrying. So, it's good to be pleasantly optimistic. But being suspicious is also a way of keeping your character alive longer. All right, for the love of all that's holy, don't go in the water or the fog. That's okay. If the fog needs to come to you, the fog will come to you, and it always moves faster than you do. The water's a little bit trickier. Water has inherent dangers. Drowning is the big one, but also that many of your weapons, and as an airbound creature, aren't going to work as well in the water. Magics generally don't work as well in the water in many cases. So, yeah, it's a hostile environment, that's for sure. Try not to go into the things that are obviously dangerous or suboptimal. That's a pretty good explanation. Sure, why not? But yeah, people at the same point will also say, oh my gosh, it's an unholy temple. We shouldn't go in the unholy temple because we're all going to be cursed or bad things are going to happen. But you're adventurers. You're going to go into the unholy temple anyhow. You're going to loot it and you're going to maybe defile it. So you're eventually going to go in that water, and you're eventually going to go in that fog anyhow. Let's be honest here. 10, write that down. You won't remember it late, but the DM will. Actually, we appreciate when you write it down, because if we forget to write it down and we forget, I'm glad when you remind us. Absolutely true. And this can vary too, depending on how many game masters make things up off the top of their head. I frequently and flagrantly improvise. And that's not a weakness in my game. It means that I'm not ever afraid that my players are going to deviate from what I expect. I don't expect, and therefore I react. And when I react and I do a good job of doing what I do, and I do a good job of doing what I do because I do what I do well. You're welcome. But sometimes details get missed. Sometimes improvising too wildly can lead to you disconnecting something important in your brain, and if the players are there to pick you up, it's good for everybody. But it's also great too, and I will say this because this just happened to me. I had this great plot idea where I was going to tie up an old enemy into a current circumstance, and my players are starting to journal. They are starting to write down what happens to their characters. I have a chronicler, and I've got 2 backup chroniclers who are working on their game. And out of the blue, the deep thinker of the group, who does definitely delve into thinking about the game outside of the game and really just enjoys his character and being there, suddenly pops up. It just outs the character that was responsible, who they hadn't seen in several months. I was like both so shocked and so flattered at the same time. It was great. I sputtered a lot and seemed outraged, but I honestly was very impressed and very pleased. 11, tricky lock. Ask the barbarian to open it up for you. Now, this is a good strategy in 2 counts. Number 1, the suboptimal route is often still something that's easily achievable by the group. And number 2 is that no obstacle is worth delving over for an entire hour of game time chatting about it. Unless it is the absolute end of the campaign, rarely is it worth discussing endlessly. But groups still like to do that. but sometimes the shortcut solution works just fine. Now, granted, the suboptimal method is often suboptimal for a variety of reasons. And having a barbarian angrily destroy a door is noisy, which may attract attention. You can't use that door to protect yourselves anymore, so that might be a problem. So, you know, and it also takes time. So there are often disadvantages. You just have to weigh them out before you make your decision, and you're golden. All right, 12. Anything is a weapon if you roll high enough. I love when players do improvised stuff. I played one character with the entire idea of him doing nothing but improvised weapon fighting. I had a Goliath Barbarian. Anything he could lift up, he could conceivably use as a weapon, including other enemies. And it was great. It was glorious. I made so many attack rolls at just disadvantage until I picked up Tavern Brawler. And now all improvised weapons are considered proficient. I was just in my glory. Chucking people around, grabbing benches, grabbing barrels, grabbing whatever. And had a DM who was just willing to go with it. And it was wonderful. I highly recommend it. And if you don't have express description of something in a place, but it's conceivable that that object would be there, as a player, add to the narrative. Speak it into existence. If you are in a tavern and some mean Mother Hubbard's looking at you and he is ready to throw down, then saying, I grab a tankard and I throw it at his head is not unrealistic. There should be tankards around. It's a bar, right? So yeah, of course, as a game master, I'm going to roll with that. Absolutely there's a tankard there, and you throw it. Go ahead and roll. Just to keep the action going, to keep it going quickly. That's all good. 13, loot everything. Yeah, I mean, that's a dream, isn't it? But there's two things. Number one, some things just aren't worth carrying. 5,000 copper pieces? Well, it is worth 50 gold. It's a freaking ton of weight, though. The very first treasure that was ever given out in Dungeons & Dragons to Ernie Gygax, Gary's son, was a stack of copper coins. He couldn't carry them all. He didn't have the weight encumbrance to carry all of that. So he had to take what he could, and I think he left. I don't recall exactly what happened there, but yeah, the first treasure ever was a ton of copper. That's like going out and finding a ton of pennies. Yay! Not rolls of pennies. No, just a pile of pennies. Is it worth the time to scoop it into sacks? And then, ooh, we've got all those pennies. Now I'll have to count them and spend them. Yeah. Not everything is worth carrying. Also, there are cursed things out there. So sometimes just picking up something that's cursed gets you the curse. Then you'll find the cost is not worth carrying it. If it is a glowing skull that talks to you, you might want to think about how good it is to pick that up. 14, never draw the card. This is, of course, a direct allusion to the deck of many things, which if you draw a card, you have a random chance of something really good happening, mediocre good, mediocre bad, or very bad. Some of the very bad things can be avoided. At least a couple of them can't, and you are done. Maybe not dead. I don't think very many of them completely kill you without any other option, but you are at the very least going to be a very big inconvenience for your group to get you back. And then you have to think, are they going to? That doesn't always happen sometimes. If somebody draws from the deck of many things and it goes south, and they go poof, I know a lot of groups will go, shouldn't have drawn it, and just move on. So you got to be careful about that. On the other hand, good things can happen. Sometimes taking risks is worth it. And there's any number of examples of people who've won big on something like a deck. So, including me, I have drawn from decks of many things and come out with a decent ending. So, yes, takes your chances when it's wise to take your chances. Now, another thing, too, that you can do is minimize your chances of bad things happening with things like that. For example, in our group, we had a group of characters together that analyzed what a deck is to the best of their ability and decided that if they signed a pact where all of them would have a couple of outlines, circumstances that would come up that would dictate how they would use it to the insurance of everybody. For example, if somebody drew the card that granted wishes, they would not use them right away. they would save them so that if somebody else drew a card that was bad, they would use a wish to bail them out. So if they got the dungeon or the abyss, they're covered because one of their group was fortunate. I've seen things like that. And if you win anything, any kind of treasure or something, we still split it as a group, so everybody profits from that. Especially because if you alone have something and you lose all of your possessions, it doesn't affect the group. But if you split everything up, the group will hopefully cover you if you are reduced down to nothing. So that's the idea at any rate. Did it work out? It actually did. We ended up getting a keep, a couple of magical items, and we ended up 1 or 2 levels gained, I believe. So it worked out pretty good for that group. But there were some bad draws, certainly. There were some negative consequences, and we helped each other through them. It wasn't too bad. Alrighty, next. If the item is smarter than you are, it has its own agenda. One of the classic items in Dungeons & Dragons has been intelligent magical weapons. They're legendary. And one of the legends of Dungeons & Dragons are characters who get a sword or a weapon that is way smarter than they are and does not want what they want, and then takes them over, and suddenly they are possessed by the weapon, and the weapon doesn't want them to be where they're at anymore, so they try to leave. That's a legendary circumstance that happens sometimes still. Not as often these days. D&D has gone averse to just out of hand making players lose control of their characters or dying, so it's a little bit easier to be more risk averse because the risks aren't as many. You can cover your bases much easier too, but it does still happen sometimes. So sometimes you just got to be careful. Classic example of that, if you are a fan of the comic Knights of the Dinner Table made by Jolly Blackburn of Kenzer & Company. And there was a great story he had of a sword called Carvin Marvin. And entire groups of his players would go hunting for Carvin Marvin, and it would take them over and kill them because they weren't worthy of touching him. He was insane. They described his voice as being like Don Rickles with a toothache. And it was brutal, absolutely brutal. And the entire party would get wiped out trying to get Carvin Marvin. But it was so powerful, they still wanted to. Classic story. Yes, here we go. 16, the dragon is never your friend. Take off on the Shadowrun mantra, never deal with a dragon. In that, it's impossible to understand all of the ins and outs of dragonkind and their minds and how they work. They're not human, and they have their own dedication to their own interests. Oftentimes, survival and building their horde, and then they're so smart they come up with mind games about all kinds of other things they want to do. And you are just a pawn in their schemes. Frequently. Not always, but frequently. And with the perspective of a long life, that can really change how they play their chess of life. So, never deal with them or never trust them, never your friend. Not entirely true, but they're probably never going to be your friend in the same way that you understand friends. Going to bat for you, risking themselves for you, doing you favors. Now, with the dragon, it's never that simple. But it's not to say they can't, in the end, do that. There have been any number of really good stories. Read the story of Huma, Knight of the Land... Knight of... What was he? A Knight of the Rose? Or no, I think it was just a humble Knight of the Crown in the Dragonlance novel. It's excellent. Excellent. And he does have a very close bond with a dragon. Very close. 17, don't get on the boat. The DM has a horde of nautical beasties that they've never been able to use. And guilty as charged. Yeah, sometimes that is true. Sometimes just having an opportunity to go someplace and do something new means we suddenly get to use all the stuff we've never done before. It is true to a point, but sometimes you just kind of have to, right? That's how the adventures are often written, too. 18, protect the healer. Now, that on its face makes sense, but if you don't have the context of old school gaming, you'll never appreciate just how important it is. Back in the day, when somebody made a cleric, they made basically a naked fighter. Less hit points than a fighter, not able to use all the weapons of a fighter, including some of the higher end bladed weapons. So they were just kind of a meh fighter. But they were the most important person on the group. They were not to risk themselves for no great reason. Maybe to save everybody else, they might move up and help, but primarily no. Their job was to support everybody, and that meant keeping out of danger. Why? That important second level. Now, again, if you only played modern games, you won't understand this, but back in the day, first level clerics got no magics. Second level, you get your first spell, and all of a sudden you have access to healing. I know some people will tell you that their clerics did not take healing spells. They took something else, and they're lying, mostly. Almost every first level cleric, the first spell they get is Cure Light Wounds. And that's your at that point of your life, that is your only purpose. Later, you will have the blessing to be more diverse in your magics, but starting off, that's your saving everybody's life, keeping everybody vital is your task. And some of us were really good at it. And if the cleric dies, all that experience they got was wasted. Very important. You need them to survive to level up so they can get the bigger magics. That will be important later. Second importance, the wizard. Because the wizard is going to be the person that you're going to count on to take care of problems down the road that would either be extremely wasteful, for example, hacking through an entire room of orcs with just your warriors. That's going to take time and they're going to get scratched up. Wizard, fireball, takes care of the whole thing. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody is fine. The wizard used one small portion of their power, if they survive long enough to get that. But all of the cards are against the wizard. They have the fewest hit points. They can't use cool weapons. They have a pitiful number of spells to start out with. And until modern gaming, once their pitiful number of spells was gone, that was it. They were done. You had to be creative in how you were useful as a low-level wizard. And those of us who love playing wizards, we got to be. We were the eyes of the group. We were the person handing everybody what they needed. We were the person who would throw oil. We would hold the torch. We would hold the lantern. We would do the things so everyone else could do their thing. Then, eventually, the worm would turn, we would hit 5th level, and it all turned to the gravy train after that. But that was how the game once was. 19. Talk to people. You never know what you don't know. I know people who think that roleplay is a burden in a role-playing game. They want to get to the action. They want to solve the action. They are thrill monkeys. The problem is the game master usually has some elements in mind that allow them to get a chance to roleplay, living vicariously through the characters they run. We like that part of the game too. Sometimes we like that more than we like the combat part of the game. And my players have kind of been groomed by now to the point where they understand that not everything is going to be about the dice rolling and the hacking and slashing. I want their personalities formed. I want their characters to have wants and needs and perspective and personality. And if they do, we're all going to have a much better time. And if they don't, and they just want to get to the combat, they're going to be very, I'm not going to say very bored, because I always put some combat in, but it's not the focus of many of my games. So, especially as I go older and the endless clattering of dice and sorting out where the blows go and it just gets to be a bit much. So, and then finally, 20, bring enough to share. Now, yeah, of course, on its face, it sounds like, well, yeah, if you're going to bring snacks, bring enough for everybody. It's a social game. Support everybody at the table. And that's a wonderful idea. Now, not all groups will do that. For example, my group, generally everybody brings their own supper. And we'll eat it together because we want to get to the action, number one, and you can talk and eat at the same time. But more than that, it's like we want to get here. We want to be with our friends. We want to talk together about what's going on maybe before the game. And that can be a wonderful bit of stress relief, social connecting, and so on. Sometimes we will bring enough food for everybody, though. Like, I generally will try to bring, cookies or something, so that I make sure that if somebody is hungry at the table, they don't have that distracting them from the game. And also, I like to treat my friends. But it also does mean that if you are the kind of person who giveth generously, make sure that you can serve everybody. So, for example, if you are a wizard, save a fireball, just so that you have enough for everybody. So when that surprise party shows up, and they're counting on you all to be exhausted and tapped out, and they can come in and just roll you, and you greet them with a smile and a fireball, you've done your job. And that budgeting is really the art of playing a spellcaster back in the day, where you only had a limited number of spells, and they didn't get to change. You just had what you had. Yeah, if you ended the day wiped out on spells with just a couple of spells in reserve, it felt so good. Because you've mastered that role. You did a great job that day of being the spellcaster that everybody needed. So that's my thought. 20 tactics. Some of them were guidelines, but maybe these were things that you either found useful or you yourself laughed with me at some of the interpretations. I hope so. And I hope that you liked it enough to come back. So if you did, please like, subscribe, notify yourself that I make more videos, all the YouTube stuff, and tell your friends. Maybe they'll like these little slices of gaming philosophy and theory with me. I certainly hope so. But more than anything, I would love it if you commented. Any one of your own rules that you think should be on this list. This is only 20. There's a heck of a lot more, and I trust that you'll be able to add to that. So feel free to leave in the comments. We'd love to see it, and maybe that'll even inspire a future video. But more than anything else, I really do hope that you come back for more, because that's why I do this. I want to entertain you, and I want to be here for you. So if I can be your dungeon tutor, I hope that between that next video and now, that you, yes, you, get a chance to roll some dice, to play some games, to have some fun, but stay safe, everybody. Until that next time, my friends, farewell.